Chicago 2027. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the polished hood of a Tesla Cybertruck as Ezekiel Zeke Harrison stood pressed against the vehicle, cold steel cuffs biting into his wrists. A growing crowd gathered, murmurs of disbelief and outrage spreading through the busy street. Officer Brady Knox and Lieutenant Marcus Slater stood over him, exuding the confidence of men who had done this before and knew they could get away with it. Ezekiel Harrison, you're under arrest for operating an unregistered vehicle and resisting arrest. Zeke kept his face composed, but inside his pulse was hammering. This wasn't about a parking ticket anymore. What do you think just happened here? This is only the beginning. Drop a comment below and tell us your thoughts. If you want to see justice served, hit that like button and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode, you won't want to miss it. Alert. 12 hours earlier. The morning sun glowed against the glass skyscrapers of downtown Chicago as Zeke pulled his Tesla Cybertruck into a parking spot outside West Loop Coffee and Roasters. It had been a solid morning. The latest quarterly report from his cybersecurity firm showed steady growth, and negotiations with a major hospital network were nearly finalized. Stepping out of his truck, Zeke adjusted the cuffs of his custom-tailored Navy suit. At 42 years old, he carried the confidence of a self-made entrepreneur, a man who had built a tech empire from scratch. As he locked his truck, he noticed the faded white lines on the pavement. Was this even a legal spot? He glanced around. Other cars were parked in the same alignment. Should be fine. Inside, the rich aroma of espresso greeted him. The barista, Chloe, a friendly college student who knew all her regulars, had already started preparing his usual. A double espresso, extra shot, no sugar. "Morning, Mr. Harrison, the usual?" Chloe called over the hiss of the espresso machine. Zeke smiled. "Chloe, how many times do I have to tell you? Just call me Zeke." She chuckled. "Habit, sir. You always look so professional." Zeke had just picked up his espresso when he caught something unusual through the large front window. A Chicago PD patrol car parked across the street. Officer Brady Knox, a 28-year-old cop eager to prove himself, sat inside watching Zeke's Cybertruck with barely concealed distaste. "Nice car. Fancy suit. Bet he thinks the rules don't apply to him," Knox muttered to himself, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Knox, issuing a citation for illegal parking, West Loop District. Copy that, Knox." As Zeke took another sip of his coffee, he watched Officer Knox step out of his cruiser, circling the Tesla like a predator. Something about the way the officer moved made Zeke set his cup down. "Chloe," he said, frowning, "I think I'm getting a ticket." She followed his gaze and scoffed. "For what?" "Everybody parks there." "Apparently not today." Placing his cup on the counter, Zeke pushed open the cafe door just as Knox tucked the ticket under his windshield wiper. "Excuse me, officer," Zeke called out, keeping his tone polite. "Is there a problem?" Knox turned slowly, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Good morning, sir. You're parked in a restricted zone." Zeke glanced at the faded pavement markings and then down the block at the parking sign, partially obscured by an overgrown tree branch. "Officer, I understand you're doing your job, but that sign isn't clearly visible. And these lines? Practically invisible." Knox's smirk faded slightly. "Ignorance of the law isn't an excuse." "Right. But common sense should be." Knox's posture stiffened. Before Zeke could say another word, a second patrol car pulled up behind his Tesla. A veteran officer, Lieutenant Marcus Slater, 50, a seasoned cop with ice blue eyes and a reputation for playing rough, stepped out, surveying the scene with quiet authority. "Everything all right here, Knox?" Slater asked, his voice steady but carrying weight. Knox straightened up. "Issuing a citation, sir. Subject is being difficult." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "Difficult?" I asked a question. Slater took a step closer, deliberately invading Zeke's personal space. "Sir, are you refusing to comply with a lawful citation?" Zeke exhaled slowly. This was getting out of hand. "Not at all, Lieutenant Slater. Just trying to clarify." Slater's cold gaze didn't waver. "Name and ID." Zeke hesitated. "Am I being detained?" Slater's jaw tightened. "When an officer asks for identification, you provide it. That's the law." Zeke knew his rights, but he also knew how these situations could escalate. Moving carefully, he reached for his wallet. Slowly, Knox warned, his hand drifting toward his holster. The threat wasn't lost on Zeke. He extracted his license with exaggerated calm, handing it over. Slater studied it longer than necessary. "Not from around here, are you, Mr. Harrison?" "Lived in Chicago for 15 years. My company's headquarters is 5 blocks from here." "Company?" "Harrison Cybersecurity Solutions." Slater didn't react, but something flickered behind his gaze. "Run the plates, Knox." Knox nodded, returning to his cruiser. Zeke frowned. "Is this really necessary?" "It's a parking ticket." Slater folded his arms. "Just doing our due diligence." Knox returned a minute later, visibly excited. "Vehicle is registered to Harrison Cybersecurity, but there's an issue with the registration." Zeke blinked. "What issue? I renewed it last month." Knox's grin widened. "System says it's pending. Technically, you shouldn't be driving this vehicle." "Bullshit." Zeke pulled out his phone. "I have the confirmation email." Slater's hand shot out, gripping Zeke's wrist before he could unlock the screen. "Stop right there." The move sent a ripple of unease through the growing crowd of onlookers. Someone pulled out their phone, recording. "He's just checking his registration," a voice called from the cafe. Slater ignored them. "Sir, place your hands on the vehicle." Zeke's pulse ticked up. "Are you serious?" Knox's hand was now resting on his firearm. "You resisting, sir?" Slater's tone dropped, cold as steel. The fluorescent lights in the precinct buzzed with an unsettling hum as Ezekiel, Zeke Harrison, was shoved forward, his cuffed wrists biting into his skin. The ride to the 12th District Police Station had been deliberately rough. Every pothole, every sharp turn, a not-so-subtle message from Lieutenant Slater and Officer Knox. "Let's go, big shot," Slater growled, gripping Zeke's arm harder than necessary as they entered through the side door. The smell of stale coffee and sweat filled the air as other officers barely spared him a glance. At the booking desk, Sergeant Ralph Monroe, an older officer with a permanent scowl, barely looked up as he took Zeke's information. "Charges?" Monroe asked lazily, fingers already tapping at the keyboard. "Operating an unregistered vehicle, resisting arrest," Slater replied smoothly, pushing Zeke forward. Zeke held his ground. "I did not resist arrest, and my registration is valid. You're fabricating charges." Slater leaned in close, his breath warm against Zeke's ear. "Save it for the judge." With methodical precision, Monroe stripped Zeke of his belongings: wallet, watch, phone, even his wedding ring. Everything was cataloged with mechanical efficiency before being placed in a plastic evidence bag. "Holding cell 3, Monroe finally muttered, nodding toward a dimly lit hallway. Slater and Knox led Zeke down the narrow corridor, passing several empty cells before stopping at one already occupied. Inside, a man in his early 40s, muscular build, wearing a faded denim jacket, sat on the bench, head resting against the wall. He looked up as Zeke was pushed inside. The door clanged shut behind him. Zeke rubbed his wrists, the skin red where the cuffs had dug in. He turned to face his cellmate. "What are you in for?" Zeke asked, attempting to mask his frustration. The man gave a dry chuckle. "Parking violation." Zeke frowned. "Seriously?" "You tell me," the man shrugged. "Seems like being black in the wrong place at the wrong time is enough these days." "What's your name?" "Jamal Carter." They shook hands, both silently acknowledging the absurdity of their situation. What's really going on here? This is bigger than just one arrest. Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. If you want to see how Zeke fights back, hit that like button and subscribe, because the next episode is about to get real. The metallic clang of the cell door still echoed in Zeke's ears as he sat on the hard bench, staring at the cold concrete wall. "So, what's your story?" Jamal Carter asked, studying Zeke. Zeke exhaled, running a hand over his face. "Pulled into a parking spot, got a ticket, questioned it. Next thing I know, I'm in cuffs." Jamal let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Before Zeke could respond, heavy footsteps approached. Slater and Knox stood outside the cell, smug grins plastered across their faces. "You've got friends in high places, Harrison," Slater said, twirling the keyring in his fingers. "Someone's making calls for you." Zeke straightened. "Sam." Before Slater could open the door, another voice rang out. "Step aside, Lieutenant." The air shifted. A tall, broad-shouldered black man in his early 40s strode into view, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Sam Dawson, Chief of Police. His presence alone sent a ripple of unease through the precinct. "What the hell is going on here?" Sam demanded, eyes locking onto Slater. Slater barely flinched. "Routine arrest, Chief. Operating an unregistered vehicle." Sam's eyes darkened. "That's funny, because I just got off the phone with the DMV. Harrison's registration is valid." Knox swallowed hard. Slater didn't even blink. Sam turned to the officer at the booking desk. "Release him, now." Monroe hesitated, but, under Sam's glare, moved to comply. As the cell door swung open, Zeke stepped out, rolling his sore wrists. "This isn't over," Slater muttered under his breath. Sam's gaze turned ice cold. "No, it isn't." As Zeke gathered his belongings, he glanced back at Jamal, still sitting behind bars. "What about him?" Zeke asked. Sam turned to Monroe. "What's his charge?" Monroe shrugged. "Loitering." Sam's jaw clenched. "Release him too." Monroe hesitated again. Slater stiffened. "I said, release him." A tense silence filled the precinct. Then finally Monroe sighed and grabbed the keys. As Jamal stepped out of the cell, he nodded at Zeke. "Guess I owe you a drink." Zeke smirked. "I'll hold you to that." The metallic clang of the cell door still echoed in Zeke's ears as he sat on the hard bench, staring at the cold concrete wall. "So, what's your story?" Jamal Carter asked, studying Zeke. Zeke exhaled, running a hand over his face. "Pulled into a parking spot. Got a ticket. Questioned it. Next thing I know, I'm in cuffs." Jamal let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Before Zeke could respond, heavy footsteps approached. Slater and Knox stood outside the cell, smug grins plastered across their faces. "You've got friends in high places, Harrison," Slater said, twirling the key ring in his fingers. "Someone's making calls for you." Zeke straightened. "Sam." Before Slater could open the door, another voice rang out. "Step aside, Lieutenant." The air shifted. A tall, broad-shouldered black man in his early 40s strode into view, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Sam Dawson, Chief of Police. His presence alone sent a ripple of unease through the precinct. "What the hell is going on here?" Sam demanded, eyes locking onto Slater. Slater barely flinched. "Routine arrest, Chief. Operating an unregistered vehicle." Sam's eyes darkened. "That's funny, because I just got off the phone with the DMV. Harrison's registration is valid." Knox swallowed hard. Slater didn't even blink. Sam turned to the officer at the booking desk. "Release him, now." Monroe hesitated, but, under Sam's glare, moved to comply. As the cell door swung open, Zeke stepped out, rolling his sore wrists. "This isn't over," Slater muttered under his breath. Sam's gaze turned ice cold. "No, it isn't." As Zeke gathered his belongings, he glanced back at Jamal, still sitting behind bars. "What about him?" Zeke asked. Sam turned to Monroe. "What's his charge?" Monroe shrugged. "Loitering." Sam's jaw clenched. "Release him too." Monroe hesitated again. Slater stiffened. "I said, release him." A tense silence filled the precinct. Then finally Monroe sighed and grabbed the keys. As Jamal stepped out of the cell, he nodded at Zeke. "Guess I owe you a drink." Zeke smirked. "I'll hold you to that." The aftermath begins. The cold night air bit at Zeke's skin as he and Jamal stepped out of the precinct, flanked by Sam. Zeke took a deep breath, trying to shake off the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "What the hell was that, Sam?" Zeke asked, rubbing his wrists. Sam let out a slow breath. "That was Slater and Knox flexing their power. But this goes deeper, Zeke. They knew your registration was valid. That arrest wasn't a mistake. It was planned." Jamal scoffed. "Damn right it was. You think they just happened to stop guys like us for no reason?" Zeke's mind churned. If they targeted him, how many others had they done this to? Sam's expression hardened. "Listen to me. You need to lay low. I pulled strings to get you out. But Slater and his people won't let this go. They're going to try and bury this." Zeke shook his head. "I'm not just walking away from this." Sam sighed. "I knew you'd say that. Look, I've been building a case on Slater and some of the other guys at the 12th District for months, but I don't have enough hard evidence. They're smart. They cover their tracks. But tonight, they made a mistake. Zeke narrowed his eyes. So let's use it. Sam nodded. We will, but we need proof. Something airtight. Otherwise, Slater's just going to spin this as a misunderstanding. Jamal crossed his arms. You know who else they've screwed over? Business owners in my neighborhood. You're not the first guy they've pulled this stunt on, Zeke. You're just the first with enough power to fight back. Zeke's jaw tightened. Then let's fight back. A dangerous game begins. The tension in the air was thick as Zeke, Jamal, and Sam walked down the quiet streets of Chicago. The weight of what had just happened sat heavy in Zeke's chest. He'd gone from a simple parking ticket to being thrown in a cell, and it was clear now that he wasn't just some random target. Jamal rubbed his wrists, still sore from the handcuffs. All right, what's next? Because I don't know about you, but I'm not about to let those bastards get away with this. Sam sighed, rubbing his temple. We need a plan. Right now, Slater and Knox are scrambling. They know I bailed you out, Zeke, and they're going to do whatever it takes to cover their tracks. Zeke crossed his arms. Then we hit them before they can erase the evidence. Sam looked at him carefully. This isn't a corporate boardroom, Zeke. These guys don't play fair. You're dealing with corrupt cops who have been doing this for years. If we go after them, they won't just sit back and take it. Zeke's jaw clenched. Neither will I. The evidence trailed back at Zeke's apartment. He powered on his laptop, fingers moving quickly as he accessed his company's cybersecurity network. He wasn't just any businessman. His entire career was built on tracking digital footprints and exposing cybercrime. And now he was about to use those same skills to go after the people who put him in cuffs. Jamal leaned over his shoulder. What exactly are you looking for? Zeke pulled up traffic camera footage from the block where he was arrested. If I was targeted, there's got to be a pattern. Other victims, other random arrests. After an hour of digging, Zeke found it. A list of traffic stops, almost all of them involving Black and Latino business owners in the West Loop district. Jamal let out a low whistle. Man, this isn't just bad luck. This is a racket. Sam, sitting nearby, leaned forward. They're targeting business owners, probably trying to force people to sell their properties or move out. Who benefits? Zeke narrowed his eyes. Real estate developers. He pulled up property sales records and, sure enough, multiple businesses owned by Black and Latino entrepreneurs had shut down in the last 2 years, all after police interactions. And the buyer? A company called Westfield Urban Development. Sam's face darkened. That name sound familiar? Because it should. The CEO of Westfield is close friends with Deputy Commissioner Randall Graves. Jamal shook his head. So this isn't just some rogue cops on a power trip? This is organized. Zeke exhaled. And now we have proof. Striking back, Sam checked his watch. We need to be smart about this. If they know we have evidence, they'll shut us down before we can go public. Zeke nodded. We need to secure backups. I'll store everything on an encrypted drive and have my legal team ready to go. Jamal cracked his knuckles. And I'll start talking to people. There's no way we're the only ones who've been targeted. Sam hesitated. There's one more thing. Slater and Knox, they don't work alone. Graves has influence across the city. If we go after them, you need to be ready for what comes next. Zeke met his gaze. I've built my company from the ground up, fought corporate sharks, and outplayed some of the biggest cyber criminals in the world. You think I'm afraid of some dirty cops? Sam gave a small smirk. Then let's bring them down. The trap is set. Zeke leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The evidence was clear. Slater, Knox, and their corrupt network weren't just harassing people. They were orchestrating a citywide scheme to force minority business owners out and hand over prime real estate to Westfield Urban Development. But knowing the truth and proving it in a way that could take them down were two different things. They needed undeniable, inescapable proof. Sam sat across from him, arms crossed. We can't just drop this to the media or internal affairs. Graves has connections everywhere. If we don't move carefully, this all disappears. Jamal nodded. We need them on tape. We need Slater or Knox admitting to what they're doing. Zeke exhaled, then looked up. So we set a trap. The bait Jamal had an old friend, Luis Mendoza, a small business owner who had just received a sudden surprise code violation notice on his restaurant in the West Loop district, the same pattern as the others. It was perfect. Luis agreed to meet Slater in person, pretending to negotiate a way out of his violations. What Slater didn't know was that Luis would be wired with a hidden microphone and a live stream directly feeding into Zeke's encrypted servers. If Slater plays true to form, Sam muttered, watching as they set up the sting operation, he's going to demand a payout or threaten something worse. Zeke's fingers drummed against the desk. Either way, we'll have everything we need. The meeting. The next afternoon, Luis walked into an old warehouse just outside downtown, the location Slater had told him to meet. Zeke, Sam, and Jamal sat in a van a block away, watching the live feed through Zeke's tablet. Luis' voice crackled through the speakers as the audio streamed in real time. Then Slater arrived. "Mendoza," Slater greeted, his tone slick and confident. "Glad you came. Let's make this simple. You want to keep your restaurant open? Then you're going to pay up." "How much?" Luis asked, playing his role perfectly. Slater smirked. $10,000 up front, and you stay in business." Luis hesitated. "And if I say no?" Slater leaned in, his voice dropping lower. "Then I make your life hell. Health inspectors, fire marshals, random break-ins. We can keep at it until you give up and sell." "Just ask the others." Zeke clenched his jaw. "Gotcha, you son of a bitch." Jamal fist-pumped. "That's it. That's what we needed." Then suddenly Knox's voice cut through the audio. "Slater, we got a problem." Zeke's stomach dropped. They knew. The takedown before anyone could react. Static filled the speakers. Sam grabbed his radio. "Luis, get out, now!" But it was too late. Through the surveillance cameras, they saw Knox and two other officers storm into the warehouse, guns drawn. Luis threw up his hands, trying to talk his way out, but Slater grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the table. "You trying to set me up, Mendoza?" Slater growled. Zeke moved before he could think. "We have to go now." Sam grabbed his gun. "We call backup first. If we rush in there, we'll be walking into an ambush." Jamal shook his head. "We don't have time. They'll make Luis disappear." Zeke's mind raced. "We don't need to go in. We just need to make sure they can't erase this." He pulled out his phone and sent the live recording straight to multiple media contacts, lawyers, and social media platforms. Within seconds, the audio and video of Slater's confession were everywhere. It's all out in the open now. But Slater and his crew aren't going down without a fight. What do you think happens next? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. And don't forget, hit that like button and subscribe, because the next episode, it's going to be pure chaos. Alert. The fallout begins. The moment the video went live, chaos erupted. Within minutes, major news outlets were picking up the footage. Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube exploded with headlines like "Chicago PD corruption exposed" and "Leaked recording uncovers extortion ring in the West Loop." Inside the van, Zeke watched as comments flooded in, demanding answers. Jamal chuckled darkly. "They can't erase this now." Sam, still gripping his radio, wasn't smiling. "No, but they can still kill Luis." The words sent a chill through the van. Luis was still in that warehouse. A desperate escape. Inside the warehouse, Luis Mendoza was sweating bullets. Slater had his gun drawn, rage flickering behind his cold blue eyes. "You think you can play me, Mendoza?" he hissed. "That little recording isn't going to save you." Luis swallowed hard. "You're done, Slater. The whole world is watching." Slater's jaw twitched. He knew it was true, but that didn't mean he was going down quietly. Knox stepped forward, gun at his side. "Let's just take him and disappear. We can make this problem go away." Luis's heart pounded. He was about to be executed. Then, boom! The warehouse doors crashed open, and a squad of officers in full tactical gear stormed in. "Chicago PD! Drop your weapons!" Knox and the other cops spun in surprise, but before they could react, Luis dove for cover. Gunfire erupted. Slater fired wildly, but he was outnumbered. Two officers tackled him to the ground, pinning him down. Knox tried to run, but Sam, Chief Samuel Dawson himself, stepped through the smoke-filled entrance and leveled his Glock. "Drop it, Knox." Knox hesitated, then dropped his gun. It was over. Slater's last move. Back at the station, Slater sat in an interrogation room, bloodied and furious. Across from him sat Zeke and Sam, both watching him in silence. "You're done," Zeke finally said, arms crossed. Slater chuckled, wiping his split lip. "You really think this ends with me?" Sam leaned in. "We already have enough evidence to put you away for life." Slater smirked. "Maybe, but you don't get it, do you? I'm just a piece of something much bigger. You think Graves and his people are going to let you tear them down?" Zeke narrowed his eyes. "Graves? Deputy Commissioner Randall Graves?" Slater just smiled. "Let's see how long you last." Sam exhaled sharply. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The power behind the badge. Zeke sat in his office, staring at the data on his laptop. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. Slater and Knox were just the foot soldiers. Randall Graves was the real architect of this entire operation. Sam paced back and forth, hands clenched. "We've got Slater, but Graves? He's another beast entirely." Jamal crossed his arms. "So what do we do? He's got half the city in his pocket." Zeke's fingers tapped against the desk. "We find a way to make him untouchable to his own people. We need evidence so damning that even his allies will throw him under the bus." Sam exhaled sharply. "I might know where to start." Inside the system, Sam had always suspected that not every cop in the department was dirty. Some were just stuck, afraid to speak out. He made a call. 30 minutes later, they sat across from Detective Renee Dawson, an internal affairs officer who had been trying to build a case against Graves for over a year. "I'm telling you now," Renee said, voice low, "Graves isn't just another corrupt cop. He has ties to some very powerful people. Politicians, real estate developers, even organized crime. He's insulated." Zeke leaned forward. "That just means we need the right leverage." Renee hesitated, then slid a file across the table. "This is the closest I ever got to making a case on him. If you can find what's missing, we might have a shot." Zeke opened the file. Bank transactions, offshore accounts, properties mysteriously transferred to dummy corporations. His eyes locked on a specific name, Westfield Urban Development. "This is it." Graves fights back. The next morning, Zeke's name was all over the news, but not in the way he expected. Cybersecurity CEO linked to fraud investigation. Harrison Tech Solutions under scrutiny for money laundering. Jamal slammed his fist on the table. "They're coming for you, man." Zeke's jaw tightened. "I expected it. They're trying to discredit me before we can release anything." Sam exhaled. "This is Graves's move. He's using every contact he has to bury you." Zeke's phone buzzed. A blocked number. He answered. "Harrison." A familiar voice came through. "Randall Graves." "Zeke, you're a smart guy, so I'll keep this simple. Drop it. Walk away. Take your little tech empire and go back to playing with computers." Zeke's grip on the phone tightened. "And if I don't?" Graves chuckled. "Then I take everything. Your business, your reputation. And if that's not enough, maybe I take something more personal." The line went dead. Zeke's hands curled into fists. This just got personal. A race against time. The next 24 hours were critical. Zeke, Sam, Jamal, and Renee worked nonstop, piecing together everything they had. The money trail, the connections, the real estate fraud. Then it happened. Sam's phone rang. "What? No, you need to keep him safe. Damn it." Zeke's heart pounded. "What happened?" Sam swallowed hard. "One of our witnesses, Officer Johnson, he was supposed to testify against Graves. Zeke already knew." "He's dead, isn't he?" Sam nodded grimly. "Car accident. Brakes failed. Graves is tying up loose ends." Jamal stood up. "Then we move now." Zeke's eyes burned with determination. "Agreed. We take the fight to Graves. No more waiting. The war goes public." Zeke's heart pounded as he absorbed the news. Sam had been suspended. It was a calculated move. Graves wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was sending a message. Jamal clenched his fists. "They're making sure Sam can't fight back." Zeke turned to Keller. How much time do we have before Graves moves on us? Keller exhaled sharply. He's already moving. Framing the narrative. The next morning, the headlines hit. Chief Samuel Dawson suspended amidst misconduct allegations. Corruption investigation unravels. But is the chief also guilty? Zeke slammed his laptop shut. This is bullshit. Jamal threw his hands up. They're flipping the script. Instead of Graves being the criminal, now they're making Sam the fall guy. Keller nodded grimly. This is how Graves operates. He doesn't just destroy his enemies. He makes them look like the villains. Zeke took a deep breath. Then we take this fight to the public. If Graves wants a media war, we'll give him one. The press conference that afternoon, Zeke and Jamal stood at a podium in front of City Hall, cameras flashing as reporters jostled for position. Zeke's voice was steady, but his pulse hammered in his ears. We have evidence, irrefutable evidence, of widespread corruption within the Chicago Police Department, led by Deputy Commissioner Randall Graves. The crowd murmured, pens scribbling, cameras zooming in. This is bigger than one bad cop. This is a system designed to oppress, silence, and destroy minority business owners in this city. And we have the proof. A reporter raised a hand. Mr. Harrison, are you saying Chief Dawson's suspension is part of a cover-up? Zeke didn't hesitate. Yes. Jamal took the mic. And if anything happens to us or to Chief Dawson, you'll know exactly who's behind it. The first counterattack. Zeke and Jamal barely made it back to their office before the next wave hit. Breaking. New allegations surface against Ezekiel Harrison. Federal investigation into financial misconduct underway. Zeke stared at the screen. You've got to be kidding me, Keller cursed under his breath. This was Graves' backup plan. If he can't shut you up, he'll make you look like the fraud. Jamal groaned. And now the media's going to eat this up. Zeke rubbed his temples. We need a way to shut this down before it gains traction. Sam's voice cut through the room. He had joined the call from an undisclosed location. We need to go on the offensive. Zeke frowned. How? Sam's voice was calm, controlled. We don't just leak the evidence anymore. We release everything. Every document, every recording. We dump it all, right now. Jamal hesitated. That's risky. If we show our full hand, we won't have anything left to protect us. Zeke's jaw tightened. Sam's right. We hold back, and they'll bury us. He turned back to his laptop. We go public. Tonight. The final play begins. Zeke's fingers hovered over his laptop keyboard, heart pounding. Sam was right. If they didn't act now, Graves would bury them before the truth ever saw daylight. He turned to Jamal and Keller. Are we sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back. Jamal exhaled. Man, there was no going back the moment they put you in cuffs. Keller nodded. Graves is betting on us hesitating. If we drop everything now, he loses control of the narrative. Zeke clenched his jaw and hit send. Within seconds, the entire cache of documents, recordings, bank statements, and emails linking Graves to bribery, police corruption, and racketeering flooded the internet. The war just went nuclear. Immediate fallout breaking, Deputy Commissioner Randall Graves, implicated in widespread corruption, scandal leaked documents, reveals systemic extortion and targeted harassment by Chicago PD federal authorities, announce investigation into Chicago's police leadership. Zeke's phone rang nonstop. Reporters, activists, politicians, everyone wanted a piece of the story. This is bigger than we imagined, Jamal muttered, scrolling through the flood of reactions online. The feds are involved now. Sam, still in hiding, called in. You did it. Graves is panicking. Zeke sighed. Then why don't I feel like we won? Because Graves wasn't done yet. The last desperate move that night, Zeke's home alarm blared. Security cameras caught masked men breaking in, destroying everything in sight. Vanessa and the kids were safe. Zeke had moved them to a secure location earlier that day. But this wasn't just about scaring him. It was revenge. Sam's voice was grave over the phone. Graves just crossed the last line. Keller clenched his fists. He's getting reckless. That means he's desperate. Jamal checked his phone. We've got one shot to end this. The mayor's office is calling a press conference tomorrow. If we can make sure Graves is named, it's game over. Zeke exhaled, staring at the wreckage of his home. Tomorrow it all ends, one way or another. The final showdown. The sun barely peeked over the skyline as Zeke, Jamal, and Keller stood outside City Hall. In just an hour, the mayor would hold a press conference, and everything they had worked for would either come crashing down or finally bring justice. Sam, still in hiding, was patched into their comms. "You're sure Graves is coming?" Zeke nodded. "He doesn't have a choice. If he's not there to defend himself, it'll be an admission of guilt." Jamal glanced at the news van setting up. "Yeah, well, something about this feels off." They didn't have to wait long to find out why. The last card. Just as the mayor's staff was setting up the podium, a fleet of black SUVs roared onto the scene. Out stepped Randall Graves, surrounded by his personal security team. He adjusted his tie, exuding confidence despite the avalanche of evidence against him. And then, the unthinkable happened. Breaking, federal prosecutors announce arrest warrants for Chief Samuel Dawson and Ezekiel Harrison on charges of interfering with an active investigation. Jamal's phone buzzed first. "Oh, hell no!" Zeke's face hardened. Graves wasn't trying to run. He was flipping the game. Sam's voice crackled over the line. "They're making me the scapegoat." The cameras turned, flashing in Zeke's face as reporters bombarded him with questions. "Mr. Harrison, do you have a statement about your alleged role in obstructing justice?" Graves smirked from across the plaza, stepping up to the podium. He was playing the victim. Jamal gritted his teeth. "We need something to turn this around, fast." The checkmate move, Keller, thinking quickly, pulled Zeke and Jamal aside. "Graves still has one weakness. We haven't used the recordings of him with the developers." Zeke's eyes widened. "We still have those?" Jamal grinned. "Damn right we do. And I know exactly where to drop them." Within minutes, Keller hacked into the live news broadcast, feeding the final piece of evidence directly into the mayor's press conference. The screens behind Graves flickered, then played his own voice. "I own this city. You think some nobody like Harrison is going to take me down? I decide who stays and I decide who disappears." The words echoed through the plaza. The entire crowd went silent. The reporters turned back to Graves, his smug expression now replaced with sheer panic. And then, the real feds showed up. Justice served, the U.S. Marshals pushed past Graves' security detail, locking cuffs onto his wrists. His legal team shouted, cameras flashed, but it was over. Sam's name was cleared within hours. The bogus charges dropped. Jamal clapped Zeke on the back. "Man, you really did it." Zeke exhaled, watching Graves being dragged into a patrol car. "Nah, we did it." Sam finally stepped into the sunlight for the first time in days, shaking his head. "So, what now?" Zeke looked out at the city. "Now? We make sure this never happens again. The fight for justice isn't over, but this battle, it's won." What did you think of the finale? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if you've been following this story, hit that like button and subscribe, because more untold stories like this are coming soon. Alert.